Hey folks, this is the first video in a series that aspires to teach fundamentals for Google's AppScript programming language. We're going to be using an unbounded AppScript in order to explore some building blocks that I think you'll need if you look to advance further in developing with AppScript. I'm in a project folder called Fundamentals, which is where I'll be storing my project. We're going to begin by navigating to the New section of Drive, going down to More, and then opening up an AppScript project. This prompt is just saying that anybody that has access to this folder will also be able to access this project. We're going to select Create Script, and then we're going to change the title of our project to whatever you'd like to call it. I'm going to call mine Fundamentals. AppScript is Google's version of the JavaScript programming language, and you can use AppScript in order to augment Google file types such as Sheets, Docs, Slides, Gmail, etc. Additionally, you can also use it to develop web apps and applications and add-ons and extensions and all that type of stuff. We're going to begin by discussing file types or file organization. So anytime that you open up an AppScript, whether it's an unbound project like this one, which means that it was not created from a Google file type, or a bound AppScript, which means you opened up a sheet, a doc, a deck, went to the extensions menu, and then created an AppScript file. You're always going to get a code.js file that has some boilerplate language of function, and then the name my function, and then an empty parentheses and some curly brackets. If you want to run code in AppScript, then you need to have a function. That's why whenever you open up a new file, you are presented with this boilerplate. So we're going to begin by navigating to the Files module, where we will add a new script file. We're going to change the title to a_input_output. We're going to hit enter, and you'll see that we are given another boilerplate set of function my function. I think organizing files in your project is crucial. When I first started working in AppScript, I would put all of my functions into one file and then just run my code. And that's fine, but as I got further out into the future, I found that maintaining that code base was challenging. So I've started to adopt an organization strategy of creating files for each of my functions. So this lesson is going to be structured within files so that we can contain our intentions in one place. Now you'll note that the code file comes first, followed by the a_input file. The way that files are organized in this panel are by numbers first, capital letters second, and lowercase letters third. So for example, we do not presently have the ability to sort our files, but if we change the name from lowercase a to uppercase A, then we have the ability to sort our file. Additionally, if we change the name of our code file to be 0_code, we then have the ability to put that ahead of capital A. I like to leverage this when I am developing an AppScript because I can have my quote-unquote production level code appear first by either giving it capital letters or numbers. I'm going to revert my files back to being called capital C code and lowercase a_input. So if you've worked in another integrated development environment, also known as an IDE, you might be used to having a blank file where you're able to declare a variable and start compiling your code. You will not have that ability in AppScript. You'll see that once I saved my file with these variables here, I no longer have the ability to run. And that's because AppScript requires functions in order to run. That's why when you open up a new file, you get that boilerplate that begins with a function so that you have an environment in order to execute your code. That's what we're going to be focusing on in this first lesson, is how to input and output values. Because that was something that I struggled with when I first started working in AppScript, because I came from Google Sheets and I was used to opening up a cell, inputting some data, having some output immediately come at me, which is not the case in AppScript. So we're going to begin by, if you should already have this, but if you don't, we begin by writing out a function and then we give it a name. So I'm going to call this input output. I'm going to have an open parentheses. These open parentheses are so that if your function has an input, you can declare its variable here. We are not going to be working with inputs in this lesson, so we can just leave it blank. So we'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard and we'll hit space. We're going to open up a set of curly brackets, which is required in order for us to compose our function. So we're going to hit enter twice, and we're going to begin on the third line. I'm going to be intentional about my direction in terms of when I'm hitting my keys, the keys on my keyboard. And I would encourage you to try to follow along so that when I reference a line number, you're able to see where I'm at, and we'll be at the same place. We're going to add 2 slashes. This is how you add comments in AppScript. Comments are crucial. I'm going to be leaving long comments as a way for you to be able to follow along visually after I say something. You don't have to write down everything that I say, but I would encourage you to at least enter comments so that you get in the habit of doing it. Comments are crucial when you are developing code, especially when you want to revisit code that you wrote in the past. It will be exceptionally helpful in maintaining your code and identifying bugs if they ever arise. So the first thing that we are going to do is hit the space key on our keyboard and say how to see stuff. I'm going to hit enter and then tab. So there are 2 primary ways to see things. The first is capital L logger.log open parentheses. So you can use logger.log to see anything. It will pop up in your execution log. And this is the way that I create transparency in my projects. So I'm going to enter in a single quote, which means that I am going to be using text, which is also known as a string. So I'm going to say hello. I'm going to hit the right arrow on my keyboard twice, and I'm going to add a semicolon. I'm going to save my project. And now you can see that our input-output function appears up top in this menu here, and we have the ability to run our code, which is what we will do. And now you'll see that my execution log says hello. Another way to see things is by using console.log, and we'll use open parentheses. And this time we're going to pass a number, which is also known as an integer. So I'm going to enter in my favorite number 5. I'm going to hit the right arrow on my keyboard. I'm going to add a semicolon, and I'm going to hit run. Cool. So 5 appears, hello appears, everything is looking great. The nice thing about AppScript and programming languages is if you don't want something to appear anymore, you don't have to delete it. You can add a comment in front of it, or you can quote unquote comment it out. So you have 2 options to do that. First, you can click in front of the thing that you want to comment out, and you can hit 2 slashes. And then when you run your code, you'll see that it no longer appears. Additionally, if you want to uncomment something, you can either delete both of the slashes, like I just did, and now you can see it appears again, or you can use keyboard shortcuts, which I would encourage. My primary goal is to cut down on clicks, which means the number of times that I have to move my hand over to my mouse to click on something. So I like to use keyboard shortcuts whenever I can. I am on a Mac, so all of my keyboard shortcuts are going to be for a Mac. If you're on Windows, I think the difference is when I say command, you probably use control, but I apologize because I haven't used a Windows machine in quite some time, so I don't know the keyboard shortcuts as well as I do with the Mac. So if you want to comment something out with your keyboard, you can use Shift, Command, hit the right arrow, and then hit Command and slash at the same time. And then that will comment out your code. Cool. And one other note is you can also add comments at the end of lines. So you can say little note to self. And when you highlight this and uncomment it, you'll see that that little note still remains. So you can add comments after things or before things. These are the two ways that I will use comments. Line 3 and line 5 are examples of that. Cool. So we are going to continue forward by hitting enter twice, hit the left arrow on our keyboard twice, and we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, hit space, and now we're going to learn how to create variables. And hit enter and tab. I want to make a couple of stylistic notes here. The reason that I'm telling you to hit tab after you add a comment is because it opens up the ability for you to have a little shelf so that you can collapse things. So you'll notice that my lines or the indentations on line 3 and 7 align so that I have this ability now where once we're done with this section, we have the ability to create this little shelf here where we have a comment that says how to see stuff so that we know that that's what is in this little window in there or in that little shelf. So when I say hit enter and tab, that's why I'm recommending it so that as your function gets longer, you can kind of make it the view a little bit easier so that you can focus on just the thing that you want to do at that given time. Additionally, this is one way where you could like map out what you're going to do before you do it by adding comments so that you kind of have a checklist where then you like work on your code underneath and you can close it or you can open it or whatever. Also, I didn't touch on why semicolons are there. Honestly, I don't know. I should have looked it up. I'm sorry that I didn't, but it's just something that when I learned AppScript was in all the tutorials that I watched and in all the documentation that I read. I just presume that it is a legacy of JavaScript that was adopted within AppScript. So you don't have to add them, but it is very common to see the semicolons after you finish a line. And I guess it's kind of just an indication that it's almost like a period at the end of a sentence. If somebody more knowledgeable than I has watched this video, please, educate all of us in the comments section if you find out or know why semicolons are at the end. Anyway, we're going to resume on line 8, and we're going to talk about variables. So there are 4 different ways that you can add variables in AppScript. The first is you can just declare a variable. So in this case, I'm going to use the letter X, and I'm going to set it equal to first example. I'm going to hit the right arrow, and I'm going to add a semicolon. So you don't have to, you can just like declare a variable, and that's by saying some type of character or name or whatever, and then you use the equal sign, and then you can use single quotes if you want to use a string, you can use double quotes if you want to use a string, or you can just enter in a number if you want to enter in a number. So I'm going to hit enter, and I am going to hit enter again and add 2 slashes for a comment where I will log it for transparency. So I'm going to hit enter and tab, and I'm going to use logger.log in order to log out X. Now, I want you to note that X is not showing up in our autocomplete down there, right? So when I hit X in here, you can see that we're getting something called XML service, but we are not getting the option of just the letter X. I'm going to go to the right, and I'm going to add a semicolon, and I am going to hit run. So you'll see that we are getting our first example here by logging out X. We're going to go back to line 8. We're going to hit enter, and now we're going to declare a variable of Y, and we're going to set that, actually, you know what? Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. we're going to use var. So you can see that var shows up as blue in the same way that function shows up as blue. AppScript is going to give you feedback about what you do. So var is giving you an indication that this is a special use of characters. Var is short for variable. So we are going to declare var y, and we are going to set that equal to single quotes second example. I'm going to hit the right arrow, add semicolon, and now when we hit in y, you can see that it shows up as a suggested value in our autocomplete menu. So that is the one difference, that if you do not use var or another prefix in order to indicate that this is a variable, then it will not show up as a suggestion in your search box. But as we saw, it doesn't matter. You can still just declare a variable if you want to. This is, I write Python code. I write Python quite a bit. And in Python, you don't need to declare something as a variable or anything else. You can just use a name and save something as a variable. So if you're coming from Python and you like coding in the way that you code in Python, you totally can. But again, when you look at other people's code, they are probably going to have some version of variable declaration like this with a prefix. So you might want to use that in order to align with their practices. Another example is let. So we'll set that equal to third example. So let is another way of declaring a variable. The only thing with let is I don't think you have the ability to redeclare let. So if we try to run this code, you can see that we're getting an error because Z has already been declared. So basically when you use let, it makes it so that there's only one instance of let. Whereas if you redeclare y, like the variable y, you'll see that, oh, my apologies. So we're going to log out y instead of Z now. So originally y was second example, and then we did another variable y where we redeclared it. Additionally, with x, we could also do the same thing where we are going to change x to be equal to redeclare, and we're going to log out x. And now you can see, instead of saying first example, x is now redeclare. So when you're using a variable, you have the ability to change what it is equal to. So if we do up top here, logger.log x, you'll see that we get first example, and then when we log it out down on line 14, we are getting redeclare. And that's because you have the ability to redeclare variables, but you do not have the ability to redeclare something when you use let. Additionally, there is const, which stands for constant, where you can only have one. So it's the same thing as let, where you can use const, but that's the only time that you can use const. So if we declare a variable of a after const, you'll see that the same issue arises, where we've already declared a as a constant of only one, and thus we cannot use a again. Cool. So the last thing that I want to touch on is single quotes versus double quotes. So we're going to hit enter and tab. So it doesn't matter what you use. You can use single quotes, you can use double quotes. It's really whatever your preference is. The one recommendation that I would strongly make is that you just want to remain consistent with whatever you use. So if you start using single quotes, keep using single quotes. If you start using double quotes, keep using double quotes. You don't want to mix and match. Just stick to one. There are two instances, though, where you are, at least I have found that you need to have specific use cases. So for example, if you want to use something like you are, your, right, like something like this, you're going to want to use double quotes. So we're going to declare a var of double, and we're going to set that equal to double quote, you are is the same thing as your. So you'll see we have an apostrophe in here. If we are using single quotes, what'll happen is this first single quote here will presume that this single quote here is the closing single quote of the string. And thus you're then going to have stuff outside of it. And then this one is going to think that this is another string out here. So the way to get around that is by using double quotes like this. Now there might be some type of function you could use in order to clean this up. But I just wanted to note this because I have run into this before where the apostrophe trips up these single quotes. So additionally, you have a situation where you might have single quotes that you want to use, which is if you want to quote, double quote someone, right? So if you want to have like a quote in there, like a quotation where someone says something, you'll want to have it wrapped in single quotes. So this is the only case where it's like if you're using single quotes and you have some type of like output that you want to have where you want to say the word you are as a conjugated your or I am as a conjugated I am, you'll probably want to switch over to double quotes because your string won't work. Additionally, if you have some type of like we are quoting words that someone else said and you've been using double quotes, then you're probably going to want to use single quotes like this. We're going to resume by navigating to the Files module and adding a new script file. We're going to title this b_concat_math. I'm going to hit enter. We'll change the name of our function to concat M math, and we'll hit save. We'll click on line 2, hit enter once, add 2 slashes for a comment, and hit space. We're going to be learning how to use the plus symbol. So the plus symbol can do 2 different things depending upon your use case. So the first thing that we're going to learn is using the plus symbol to concatenate strings. So we'll hit enter and tab. We're going to declare a variable. So we're going to use var, and the variable name will be called first. We're going to set that equal to single quotes, and we will say strings can. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard, and we're going to add a semicolon. Now, as we've discussed, the way that you store alphabetical characters in AppScript is in between quotation marks. So when we are using words, they are also known as strings. So we're going to be creating 2 variables that contain words, which means we are working with 2 variables with the data type of string. We're going to hit enter, and we're going to declare another variable called second. And we're going to set this equal to combined using the plus symbol. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard, and we're going to add a semicolon. We're going to hit enter twice, add 2 slashes for a comment, and then we will be adding some logging for transparency. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll use capital L logger.log with an open parentheses. And we'll be using our first variable, which is called first. We'll add a space, we'll use the plus symbol, and we'll use a space, and then we'll use our second variable, which is also known as second. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard and add a semicolon. We're going to save our function, and then we are going to hit run. Now you'll see in our execution log that we have concatenated our strings. So you can see that we have a literal representation of what we told the computer to do when we said log out the first variable plus the second variable. And we got those 2 directly next to one another. So you can see that our string in the first variable ends at can. So there is no space between can and the single quote. And our second variable has the same thing, where combined comes directly after the single quote. And thus, when we combine them together, you can see that can combined appears hyper literally. So because we had two strings and we had a plus symbol, they are now joined together. Now, if you wanted to add a space in between these two variables, what I would recommend doing is doing it logically. So you don't want to change your variables because there might be instances where you're programming in a situation where you don't have the ability to change your variables in the source material. But you can do it on the back end by adding a single quote after your plus sign and adding a space in there. You can hit the right arrow on your keyboard and add a space, and then add another plus sign. Now, when you run your code, you can see strings can combined using the plus symbol. Now, that doesn't read well grammatically, so if you wanted to continue to alter or transform, you could click in between the space, add another space, and then change the words around, right? So we're going to add in the word be, technically a string outside of our variables. So now when we hit run, you can see we have strings can be combined using the plus symbol. We're going to resume on line 8. We're going to hit enter twice, and we're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard 4 times. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and now we're going to learn how to use the plus symbol to do math. We're going to hit enter and tab. We're going to declare a variable of a, and that will be set to 5. Now you'll notice that 5 does not have single or double quotes around it, and that's because it's a number. When you're entering in a number within AppScript, you do not have quotation marks around it. You just enter in the number as it is. I'm going to add a semicolon after it. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to declare a variable of b, which will be set to 10. I'm going to add semicolon after that as well. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and now we'll be doing some logging for transparency. We're going to hit enter and tab. We're going to use logger.log open parentheses in order to do a space plus space b. I'm going to hit the right arrow on my keyboard. I'm going to add a semicolon. I'm going to hit save, and we're going to run it. Now you can see when we run our math, or when we use the plus symbol with numbers, we're getting a math operation where we have combined 5 to 10, which is what we would expect when we're using the plus symbol in other environments like a spreadsheet or a calculator. So the plus symbol has 2 primary use cases, which is the ability to concatenate strings and the ability to add numbers together. Now, if you have a circumstance where your number is formatted as a string, such as this 5 here, let's say that it had single quotes around it, you'll notice that when we run our function again, we are no longer getting 5 plus 10, we are getting 5 concatenated with 10. So we are now getting the string of 5 plus 10. So anytime that you have a string with numbers, it will then convert the numbers to be formatted as strings. So this number 10 no longer is an integer once we do logger plus, when we use this logger statement here. Now it's not altering variable b, but in the context of a plus b, it is not doing the number 5 plus the number 10, it is doing a string 5 concatenated with 10, and thus the 10 has now been converted into a string. Now there are going to be some instances where you can, so like in this instance here, I could just delete the single quotes if I wanted to, but there might be some other instances where you're working with a data set that has been polluted because there are numbers entered in there. So an example that I've come into contact with is if I'm extracting data from a spreadsheet. Typically, I'm working in Python for this. I don't really come across this problem with AppScript because it's pretty good at interpreting the values coming out of Google Sheets. But I might have a situation where people are maintaining a spreadsheet that they want to use in an application, and they will have a column with numbers, but they might not have numbers. So instead of leaving blanks or adding a 0, they'll enter in NA for not applicable or NA for not available. And that will inadvertently convert all the other numbers in the column to be strings. So in that case, I don't have the ability to go in there and clean up all of the data in the sheet. What I might do though is I might clean the data in AppScript. So in this case, we have a string of 5 set to A. So instead of changing variable A, we can modify it in our logger by using capital N number and wrapping A in parentheses. So even though it's formatted as a string in the code, when we log it out wrapped in the number function, it will transform the type from string to number so that then we are able to do a 5 plus 10 as we had originally intended. We're going to resume by navigating to the Files menu, where we will add a new script file that we will call C_dates. We'll hit enter, and we will change the name of my function to date explore with a capital E. We'll hit save. We'll click on line 2, hit enter once, add 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will extract the date and time. So we'll hit enter and tab, and we'll declare a variable called today, which will be set equal to new space capital D date. We'll add a semicolon and we'll hit enter twice, 2 slashes for a comment where we will say logging for transparency. So we'll hit enter and tab, and we'll use logger.log. We'll open up a parentheses and we will pass in the today variable with the right arrow on our keyboard and add a semicolon. We'll hit run. So you can use new date in order to extract the current date and time based on where you are located. So you can see it is Sunday, September 1st at 1:10 in the morning in 2024. So you get a date and time value when you use new date. Now I just want to kind of preface this lesson by saying that dates are very complicated because of all of these inputs that you're seeing here and the way that date times are calculated as well as how they're structured. This is a general overview of what exists within AppScript. You could spend years learning how to work with dates and times and all that type of stuff. I myself figure new stuff out every week that I didn't previously know. So this is, just a best effort to try and just expose you to dates so that if it is something that you want to work with, you have a foundation with which to grow and progress. So we're going to resume on line 7, and we're going to hit enter twice. We'll hit the left arrow on our keyboard 4 times, and we'll add 2 slashes for a comment. And now we will learn how to convert the date time to the date as a number. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll declare a variable of day, and we'll set that equal to today.getDate. We'll have an open parentheses, and we'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard and add a semicolon. We'll hit enter twice, we'll add 2 slashes for a comment, and we will say logging. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, and then we'll pass in that day variable. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard once, add a semicolon, and then run our code. So now you can see that we are extracting the day using .getDate. If you want to get the month, you do a similar thing. So we're going to resume on line 13. We're going to hit enter 2 times, hit the left arrow on our keyboard 4 times. We'll add 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will extract the month from the today variable. We can hit enter and tab. And we're going to declare a variable called month, and we'll set that equal to today.getMonth. And we'll have an open parentheses with the right arrow on our keyboard and we will add a semicolon. We'll hit enter twice, add 2 slashes for a comment. We'll say logging for transparency. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do capital L logger.log, open parentheses, where we will pass in that month variable. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard, and we'll add a semicolon. Now I want you to take note of this because it is unique. So when we log out today.getMonth, you'll see that we are returning a value of 8. But we are in September, which is the 9th month of the year. And the reason for that is because getMonth is structured in a 0 index. And that means that the count begins at 0. So January is the first month of the year, and it is commonly referred to as month number 1. So for a date, depending upon where you are, let's say that you're structuring your date in a year, month, day format. If you're in January, you would commonly write 2024-01, but in a 0 index, 1 is represented by 0. And that's why you're getting the value of 8 instead of 9, because even though we're in the 9th month, we are in a 0 index count, which is returning 8, which is technically the 9th month, even though the number doesn't represent it. So if you want to, for whatever your project is, use the month number and you want to normalize it, you can very easily do it by just adding 1 to your month. So for example, we are logging out our month here. We're not using it for anything else. We can use a plus sign, and then we can add 1. And then when we run our code, instead of returning an 8, we are now returning a 9. So we have normalized the 0 index now so that the month will always add 1 to its number in order to get the human readable version of the month number. Cool. So that is something that is going to come up as you do things in AppScript, and if you continue to program, you will need to figure out how your index is structured. There are things that are 0 index, there are things that start their index at 1. So if you are getting an unusual result, one place to begin your exploration to figure out what's going on is to see how the index is structured. So in addition to the month and day, if you want to, you can also extract the time. So I'm going to hit enter twice, left arrow on the keyboard 4 times. I'm going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and now I will extract the time. So I'll hit enter and tab. I'll declare a variable called time, and I will set that equal to today dot, and then I can get the local, is that what it is? Oh, here we go. I can get time down here, add a semicolon, hit enter twice, add 2 slashes for a comment, and I will do some logging. I'll hit enter and tab, and I'll do logger.log, and I can pass in time. And now when I run it, you'll see that we're getting our time as a number, which is not really helpful. This is an example of how working with date time can get very complicated. So, there are some instances where you get hyperliteral numbers coming back at you that are not as applicable. So what you can do is, let me see if I can do it here. There we go. Okay. So we're going to change we're going to use local time. So after our logger, we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and we're going to say get local time, and we're going to hit enter and tab. And we're going to declare a variable called local capital T time, and we'll set that equal to today dot. And when we use our dot methods, we have all of these options here. So there's so many different things that you can use. So instead of using to, we are going to use to local time string. And we'll use an open parentheses here. And we'll hit enter twice, add 2 slashes for a comment, and we'll do logging. And we'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, local time, which is that variable that we just created. And now you can see when we log out our data, instead of getting a hyperliteral time, we are now getting the local time, which is represented up here. So this is more human readable formatting. So that's going to be something that you're going to come into contact with the more that you do programming, is you're going to have literal strings or literal objects or numbers or integers or floats or all that type of stuff, which is what's represented here. This is a hyperlogical representation of the time. Or you will have the formatted version, which is human readable, which means that it's something that we're used to seeing. So if you want to do that with time, I would recommend using today.toLocalTimeString. Now, the difference between these two, and I don't have a ton of experience with the two of them, is that sometimes you're working with values and sometimes you're working with display values. So the same way in the concat and math section, when we attempted to concat a string plus a number, we got a string instead of the math operation that we wanted. The same thing can happen with dates and times, where if you're looking to do calculations to show differences in times, you might have some formatting issues. But we're not going to get into all of that today because, like I said, these things really depend on what you're looking to do with them, and they get complicated quickly because of how dynamic and how many variables there are. So we're going to resume on line 31. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard 6 times. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment. And now we are going to learn how to format the date. So we're going to hit enter and tab, and we are going to declare a variable of format capital D date, and we'll set that equal to. So there's a couple different ways that you can do this. You could use the today function, and you can use the dot, and then you could do to local date string, and you can have an open parentheses in here. And if you add a semicolon at the end, you really don't have to, but we will. We'll hit enter twice. We'll add 2 slashes for comment, and now we will say logging. We'll hit enter and tab. We'll do logger.log. We'll open up a parentheses, and we will pass in that format date. We'll hit run. And now you can see that we are getting 9/1/2024, which is the same thing as September 1, 2024, formatted in month, day, year. Now, if you don't want month, day, year, and you want a little bit more flexibility over your date formatting, you can also use utilities. So we're going to resume on line 37. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard 4 times, and we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment. And now we will format the date using utilities. I'm going to hit enter and tab. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to close some of these menus up here because we don't need them anymore. And this is why I like using that enter tab structure, because now we have a little menu here of all the things that we've done, and we have a clean screen so that we can continue to work and not feel like we're on an infinity scroll. So I'm going to declare another variable, and I'm going to reuse that format date variable that we used because it doesn't matter. We're not using it in any other context. So we will be using capital U utilities dot format date. And we have an open parentheses. And now you can see that format date as a function, my apologies, I didn't think about that before naming these variables. So what we're going to do is change this one just for best practice. So we'll call this format example, and we'll change this to format example, and then we will also call this format example. So the reason that we are changing the format date variable is because a function exists called format date. And you don't want to have the same names in here because that can result in complications for the code to compile. So you saw that we didn't have any issues, and we probably wouldn't have had any issues if we continued forward. But once I realized that a variable name was a function name that I was going to use, I changed my variable names so that it wasn't confusing and didn't cause complications. So again, I apologize for the bad direction there. I didn't even realize it. So the format date function allows you to use new date in order to come up with your own formatting of the date. So when we use toLocalDateString up here, we only had the option of getting it as the local version of month, day, year, or year, day, month, however your local region structures date strings. But with the utilities.formatDate, we have more flexibility over how we structure it. So the first thing that we're going to pass in there is that today function that we created. And we're going to use a comma. You can also use new date down here if you want to, but because we used it in a variable, our today variable, we can pass that the same way. But it doesn't matter. You can start with new date or you can use the today function. It doesn't matter. So the next thing is you establish the time zone that you want to format your date for. So I'm in Eastern Standard, so I'm going to use EST. I'm going to hit the right arrow on my keyboard. And the third argument is however we want to format it. So you'll notice in the documentation over here that year needs to be in lowercase, month needs to be in uppercase, D needs to be in lowercase. Hours needs to be in uppercase, minutes needs to be in lowercase, seconds needs to be in lowercase. So we're going to use single quotes, or you can use double quotes if that's what you've been using. And we are going to structure our date as a month, year example. So we're going to pass in 4 M's, and we're going to add a space, and then we're going to do 4 Y's, and then we're going to run our code. And now, oh, my apologies. We're going to have, actually, we need to log it in order to get it to show up. So we're going to go to line 40. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to have 2 slashes for a comment, and now we'll add some login. So we'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, and we'll have an open parentheses, and we will pass in the format example. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard, add a semicolon. You'll notice that I did not add semicolons at various points, like here in this lesson. You don't have to, the code will still compile. So now when we run it, you'll see instead of getting 9/1/24, I'm now getting full September 2024. So if you do all 4 characters, you will get the full month name. If you use 3 M's, you will get the shortened version or the truncated version. If you use 2 M's, you will get a 2-digit number. And if you use 1 M, you will get 1 number. Cool. So you can mess around with this. Same thing happens with year. So you could get 1-digit month, year. You could get, you could get full month name, day, year, and you can get full September 1st, 2024. So lots of flexibility with the utilities.formatDate. I'll let you play around with it so that you can, do whatever you want to with it. The last thing that we are going to touch on today is we're going to select line 43, hit enter twice, hit the left arrow on your keyboard 4 times, 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will learn how to add and subtract days. Enter tab, and we'll do var date capital M math, and we'll set that equal to new capital D date, and we'll open up a parentheses. And now we're going to set a new date using some math. So we're going to use that today variable that we created on line 3 up top here. So on line 4, we have var today equals new date. So we are going to reference today, and we're going to do dot set capital D date, and we'll have an open parentheses, and then we will do today dot get capital D date. We'll have an open parentheses, and then we will subtract 5. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard twice, add a semicolon, hit enter twice, 2 slashes for a comment, where we will add some logging. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, date, capital M, math. Now when we hit run, you'll see instead of September 1st, we are now getting August 27th, and that's because we subtracted 5 from today.getDate, and then we set today's date to represent those values. So we can remove 5, or we can add 5. So you'll see up top here, when we use today, we get September 1st, and then down here, we get September 6th. We're going to resume by navigating to the Files module, where we will create a new script file. We're going to call this d_arrays, and we're going to hit enter. We're going to change the name of our function to array, capital E, explore, and we will save our project. We'll go to line 2, hit enter once, add 2 slashes for a comment, and now we're going to say what an array looks like, and hit enter and tab. We're going to declare a variable called array, and we're going to set that equal to square brackets, single quotes, below. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard. We're going to add a comma. We're going to add another set of single quotes, and we'll say world. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard. We'll add a comma, and now we'll enter the number 1. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard and add a semicolon. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, where we will say that we are adding logging, and we're going to hit enter and tab, where we will say logger.log, open parentheses, and then we will pass in our array variable. We'll add a semicolon and then save our project. Arrays are very important data structures to understand when working in AppScript. Generally, working with arrays are really important in programming because it's how you process a lot of information. Arrays and dictionaries are the 2 most important data structures, in my opinion. They're the ones that I work with the most. And when you're working with large volumes of data, they're probably going to be structured either in arrays or dictionaries when they're in their raw formatting. Within AppScript, you're not going to see a lot of dictionaries. You're going to be seeing a lot of arrays and 2-dimensional arrays. And that's what this lesson is going to be focusing on. So we're going to hit run so that we can look at our array here. And you'll see that an array is structured by square brackets. And then each element within the array is comma separated. So when we created our array from scratch, we wrote out these square brackets, and then we typed out each element in our array with commas separating each element. So when we are logging out the array, we return the square brackets along with the commas separating each element. If you would like to access individual elements within the array, you can do so by clicking to the right of array, adding a square bracket, and then entering in the element number. Now, it's important to know that arrays are 0 indexed, which means if you want to access an array element, then you're going to have to reference it with 0 being the first number. In the lesson on dates, we touched on this, where the getMonth function is structured in a 0 index. So the first month is represented by a 0, and the second month is represented by a 1. The same thing happens in arrays and two-dimensional arrays. So if you want to access the first element of your array, then you're going to use 0. So when we run our console log, you'll see that when we do array square bracket 0, we are returning hello. If we want to get the second element, then we use a 1. And now you can see we're getting world. And then if we want that third element, we use the number 2. Now, if you attempt to access an element that doesn't exist in your array, so in this case, if we enter in 3 to try and get the fourth element, and we hit run, we're going to get a null value or a NaN value, which stands for not a number. So because there is no fourth element in our array, when we pass in the number 3, we get a null. So I'm going to go back to 0. I'm going to hit run. And you can see we're getting hello. And you know what? I'm actually going to just return the array. So now we're getting all of our values in square brackets. So if you see one set of square brackets, with comma separated values, then that's an indication that you're working with an array. We're going to resume on line 7, and we're going to hit enter twice. And we're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard 4 times. And we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment. And now we're going to explore two-dimensional arrays. We're going to hit enter and tab. And we're going to declare a variable called array and then the number 2. We're going to set that equal to square brackets, and we're going to hit enter. We're going to have another set of square brackets, and we'll say hey. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard and add a comma, and we'll hit space, and then we'll say universe, and then we'll hit the left arrow on our, or the right arrow on our keyboard and add a comma, and then we'll enter in the number 2. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard and we'll add a comma and we'll hit enter. Actually, you know what? Let's just stick with this for now. So we just have square brackets, then we hit enter, and then we added another set of square brackets, and then we entered in hey, comma, universe, comma, 2. We're going to be on line 12, and we're going to hit enter twice. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment. We'll do logging, and we'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, and we'll have an open parentheses, and now we'll pass in array 2. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard, and we'll add a semicolon. And now we're going to hit run. So the difference between our array variable and our array2 variable is that we are now working with a 2-dimensional array. And the way that we know that this is a 2-dimensional array is because we have 2 sets of square brackets. So the first set of square brackets represents our first dimension. So a 2-dimensional array is also known as a list of lists. The word array and list is interchangeable. If you're working in Python, then you'll be used to the word list or list of lists. In AppScript, it is referred to as an array or a 2-dimensional array. So this is an array within our 2-dimensional array. So the first dimension of the array is the array. The second dimension of the array is the individual elements within the array. So if you wanted to access the second element in the first array, you need to enter 2 dimensions in order to do so. So if you were working in an array and you wanted to access the second dimension, which is world, you would go to array and you would add square brackets and you would enter in the number 1. If you're working in a 2-dimensional array, and you enter in square brackets, the first argument that you need to enter, or the first dimension that you need to enter, is the array that you want. So in this two-dimensional array, we only have one array, which two-dimensional arrays, like arrays, are zero indexed. So if you want to access that first array, you have to use square bracket 0. You hit the right arrow on your keyboard. Now, if you would like to access the second element of the first array, you add a square bracket and you use the number 1. And I apologize, I said first, I meant second. Gets a little confusing with the 0 index here. What you need to have is array square bracket 0, square bracket 1, and that will return the second element of the first array. And now when we hit run, you'll see that we are returning world from our first array, where we have one access point, which is the element. And then in our two-dimensional array, we're getting universe. And the reason for that is because we've identified our first dimension, which is the array, and the second dimension, which is the element. Now in a two-dimensional array, you can add additional arrays. So we can add a comma here, and we can hit space, and we can add square brackets, and we can add in single quotes because we want to have a string, and we can say hi, and we can hit the right arrow and add a comment, and we can use single quotes, and then we could say galaxy, and then we could add another comma and enter in 3. And if we reset our array2 variable so that we have no additional access points, you'll see that now we have one set of square brackets, which denotes the two-dimensional array, and then each array has its own set of square brackets, which is comma separated. So now, if we wanted to access the second array and its second element, we would enter in square brackets, and we would use number 1 because 0, 1. And then if we wanted to get that second element, we would use square brackets and enter in the number 1. And then when we hit run, you can see we are now extracting galaxy because we are referencing the second array and the second element. Now, the final thing that we're going to review today is how to programmatically add arrays to an existing 2D array. So what we're going to do is we are going to take this array, our variable array, and we are going to push it into array2. So we're going to hit enter twice and hit the left arrow on our keyboard 4 times, and we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment. And now we're going to learn how to add an array to a 2D array. We're going to hit enter and tab. We're going to reference the array2 variable, and then we're going to use the .push method. And now we are going to reference our array variable. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and now we'll add some logging. And we're going to hit enter and tab. And we're going to use logger.log, and we will log out array2. And our result will have us now with a 3-array, two-dimensional array, where we have array2, where you can see we have 2 arrays within it. But when we use the .push method and push our array into it, we now have 3 arrays, which is combining our first array with our two-dimensional array. This is going to be something that you will likely use in the future when you are attempting to extract data from various places in order to create one data set. And the most common place that you will be doing that is with loops. And that's what we're going to be exploring next. We're going to resume by navigating to the Files module, where we will be creating a new script file. Our focus will be for loops, so we are going to be titling this E_for_loops. We're going to hit enter, and we'll change the name of our function to be called loop capital E explore. We're going to save our project. We're going to select line 2. We're going to hit enter once. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment where we will be declaring one-dimensional array. We're going to hit enter and tab, and now we're going to be declaring a variable of array, which will be set equal to a square bracket. We're going to be having 2 elements in this array, both of which are going to be strings. So that means we need to have quotation marks. I've been using single quotes, so that's what I'll be using. So my first element is going to be hello, and then I'm going to add a comma, and then I'm going to add another set of quotes where I'm going to add my second element of world. I'm going to hit the right arrow on my keyboard twice. I'm going to add a semicolon. I'm going to hit enter twice, and then I'm going to add 2 slashes for a comment where I'll be adding some logging. I'm going to hit enter and tab. I'll use logger.log to have an open parentheses where I will add another set of single quotes so that I can add a message to this log. I'm going to say the length of the array is, I'm going to add a semicolon, hit space, hit the right arrow on your keyboard, hit space, add a plus symbol, hit space, and then use array.length. I'm going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard and we'll add a semicolon. We will run our function, and now you can see that our output is the length of the array is 2. Now, an important note about this is that arrays are structured with a 0 index, which means that the first value is represented by 0, the second value is represented by 1, the third value, if there is one, will be represented by 2, and so on. So when we get the length of the array is 2, it is counting the elements, but that array length will have to be modified if we want to use it in reference to our array. We're going to resume on line 7, where we will hit enter 2 times, and then we're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard 4 times. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and we will now be exploring a standard 0 index for loop. We're going to hit enter and tab. So for loops are naturally 0 indexed like arrays. And it's very common that when you use a for loop, you will be leveraging either a one-dimensional array, which is what we have on line 4, or a 2-dimensional array. Later in this lesson, we're going to be exploring how to loop through 2-dimensional arrays, but for the time being, we're going to focus on a standard 0 index for loop using an array. So we will begin by typing out the word for. We're going to have open parentheses, and we are going to need to declare a variable that will be iterated. It is very common if you explore documentation or tutorials or forum posts to see that the for loop that people are referencing has a variable of I, which stands for iterable or iteration. The next thing that you need to use is in. So you are declaring a variable in some type of structure. In this case, we will be using our one-dimensional array. So we will type out the variable name that we want to loop through. That gives us for open parentheses, I in array, closing parentheses. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard. We'll hit space, add curly brackets, and hit enter. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment so that we can log out the value of I. We're going to hit enter and tab. We're going to use logger.log, open parentheses, and then we're going to pass in our variable I. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard, and we're going to add a semicolon. We're going to hit save, and then we will run our project. The first value on our console log is coming from line 7, where we are measuring the length of the array. That is telling us that the length of the array is 2. So that means we have 2 elements within our one-dimensional array. On line 12, we are logging out the value of I within our for loop. So the way that a for loop works is you start at a specific value. And if you do not declare the value of your variable, then it will start at 0. Each time the loop runs, it will add 1 or subtract 1 from the value of I. In this case, we have not declared how much I is worth, so it defaults to I. Additionally, we have not declared whether we want to increment positively or negatively, so it defaults to positive incrementation. So what we're seeing is the first log here is a value of 0. And that's because we are using logger.log I. So the first loop returns 0 because the for loop is 0 indexed. The next time it runs for the second element of the thing that we're looping through, in this case our array, we are returning the number 1. And that's because we have positively incremented on top of the value of 0 by adding 1 to it, which gives us 1. Because our array only has 2 elements in it, our loop only runs for 2 times because we are in array, for I in array. So we have the value of 0 that will be incremented for the number of elements within the thing that we are looping through, in this case, our one-dimensional array with 2 elements. We're going to go back to line 4, and we're going to click to the right of our second element, which is a string that has the value of world. We're going to add a comma, we're going to add single quotes, and we're going to type the word yay. So now our array has 3 elements. When we hit run, you'll see that those changes have been reflected to our log on line 7 as well as our log on line 12. The length of the array is now 3, and we have 3 results from our for loop, each result being incremented by 1 starting at 0. What we're going to do now is show or demonstrate why you would do this and how you would use this. So we're going to resume on line 12. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard twice, and we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, where now we will log out each element of our array. We're going to hit enter and tab. We're going to do logger.log, open parentheses, and then we're going to reference our array variable, and we're going to add a square bracket. So in our arrays lesson, we hard-coded each element of our array that we wanted to extract. So if we wanted to extract hello, then we would do array square bracket 0. If we wanted to extract world, we would do array square bracket 1, and so on. The value of a loop is that it will do that for you without you having to write out all those lines. So we can pass in our iterator variable, and we can say array square bracket I. This way, when we run our for loop, you'll see that we are accessing each element of the array. So we have logging on line 12 that is showing us the element or the value of our variable I, but we can also use that value in order to access our array elements, which is what's happening on line 15. So I'm going to comment out line 12, so we no longer need to see the value of I. And if we hit run, you can see that we are getting that output from line 7 that says the array length is 3. And then we're accessing each element of the array because we are using logger.log array square bracket I. This is the most common implementation of a for loop, and it is something that you are going to use probably in all of your projects if you continue forward with scripting in AppScript. So I'm going to comment out line 15 because I don't need it anymore. You can either manually type 2 slashes in front of the line, or you can use a keyboard shortcut. I'm on a Mac, so I did command slash. If you're on Windows, it's probably control slash. We're going to hit the down arrow once, so we're on line 16. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard twice, and now we are going to explore defining our variable I. We are going to hit enter once and hit tab, and we're going to do for open parentheses. So as I said, you can define I. And if you are looking at documentation or forum posts or whatever, you'll probably see a version of for loops similar to this, where individuals will have 3 declarations that are separated by semicolons. The first declaration is declaring a variable. In this case, we would use the character var of I. So you'll say var I, and then you'll set it equal to something. So we can set I as being equal to 0 if we want to, or we can set it equal to 1 or whatever. So we're just going to say var I is equal to 0, and then you add in semicolon. The second argument is defining how long you want your loop to run. So you can say I is less than or equal to array. So we can then add a semicolon. And then the third declaration is the way that you want to increment. So if you want to increment positively, you can do I++. And you hit the right arrow on your keyboard, hit space, add curly brackets, hit enter, add 2 slashes for comment, and now we're going to log out the value of I. I'm going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to do logger.log, open parentheses, and then we're going to pass in I. We're going to hit the right arrow, and we're going to add a semicolon. Now, I don't typically do this. My preference is just to do for I in array. I just think it's cleaner, and I typically am working with an array or a 2-dimensional array, so I want my variable I to start at 0, so I don't need to declare it. I think this is just kind of a long-winded way of getting to the root of what I want to do. Now, because I don't use this version that frequently, I apologize if this doesn't run, because I'm not sure if I can just say I is less than or equal to array. I might need to say array.length. So apologies if we get an error here. So we're going to hit run, and you can see that we didn't get any output here, and the reason for that is because I can't just say array the same way that I did up here. I'm going to do array.length. Now, if we do array.length, this less than or equal to is not going to work because array.length is giving us 3, and we only have 3 elements, which is in a 0 index, versus array.length, which is an index of 1. So instead of saying less than or equal to, we're just going to say less than array.length. And now when we hit run, you'll see that we are getting 0, 1, and 2, the same way that we got 0, 1, and 2 with for I in array. So in addition to positive incrementation, you can also do, you can take away, so you can go descending. So this is a little bit more complicated, so I apologize if this kind of, is a bit of a tongue twister or a mind melder, but I just want you to be aware of it. So in this case, we could start at the last element in our array and go backwards. So what I'm going to do real quick is go to line 21. I'm going to hit enter twice. Hit the back arrow, or sorry, the left arrow on your keyboard twice, 2 slashes for comment, and now we're going to log out the value of the array element. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, and we'll say array square bracket I. So when we declare our variable to be 0, and then we have it run for as long as I is less than array.length, which in this case is 3. That means that our starting point is 0 and our end point is 2, and we increment positively. We're getting the same thing as for I in array when we use array square bracket I. But in the event that you wanted to go backwards, right? So get the last element of your array, and then go, instead of 0, 1, 2, to go 2, 1, 0, you can modify this version of a for loop. So you can declare I to be equal to array.length. Now, when you say array.length, that's returning the number 3. So you'll need to normalize it for a 0 index by subtracting 1. You'll add semicolons and hit space, and then you'll say where I is greater than or equal to 0. And then instead of doing I++, you'll do I minus. And now when you hit save and run, you'll see that we are still getting the array length is 3. And then down here, when we reference array length and remove 1, that gives us 2. So the first output in our console is element 2, which is yay. Then we remove 1 from it because we are incrementing in a descending value, or we are removing 1 from the value of I. 2 minus 1 is 1, and thus we are getting our second element, which is world. And then after the loop finishes, we remove 1 from 1 and we get 0, which gives us our first element in a 0 indexed array, which is hello. Then, because we established that the value of I has to be greater than or equal to 0, the loop ends and our function completes. So I do not use this version of a for loop, but it is very common that you will see this structure out there. So I want you to know that it exists. My preference is the standard 0 index array. So I'll just say for I in whatever I want to loop through, and then I use the value of I the same way that we are in this version of the for loop where we are defining our value of I. Cool, so I'm going to comment out lines 24 through 20 because we don't need them anymore. And then I am going to click on line 25. I'm going to hit enter twice. I'm going to hit the left arrow on my keyboard twice. I'm going to add 2 slashes for a comment where we will learn how to loop through a 2-dimensional array. I'm going to hit enter and tab. So we don't need our standard 0 index loop. So because of the way that I set up my comment and my indentation, I have this little collapsible arrow here. So I'm going to collapse line 9, and then the same thing exists on line 18. So I'm going to collapse that, and now we have a nice clean script where we can work. So we are going to begin by declaring a 2-dimensional array. So we're going to say var array 2d, and we're going to set that equal to square bracket, and then we're going to hit enter. And then we are going to do single quote, or sorry, so one set of square brackets, and we'll have 2 strings. So we'll do hey, comma, second string will be galaxy. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard. We'll add a comma after our square brackets, and we'll hit enter, and we'll enter another set of square brackets, and we'll say hi, comma, universe. So these are strings, which means they all need to be wrapped by single quotes or double quotes, whatever you've been using, and they need to be comma separated. Cool, so now we have a 2-dimensional array, which means that we have 2 dimensions to work with. The first is the array that we want to access. So in this case, we have 2 arrays in our 2-dimensional arrays, and each array has 2 elements. So we're going to select line 31. We're going to hit enter twice, hit the left arrow on our keyboard twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and we will loop through the first dimension. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to declare for with an open parentheses I in array 2d. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard. We're going to hit space. We're going to have curly brackets. We're going to hit enter once, and we're going to log out the value of I. So we're going to hit enter and tab, capital L, logger. Sorry about that. Logger.log, open parentheses, single quotes. The value of I is colon space, go outside of your single quotes, hit space, plus sign, space, I. Hit the right arrow on your keyboard, hit space, open curly brackets. Sorry, we don't need curly brackets. I don't know why I did that. Okay, we're going to add a semicolon. That's what I meant to say. So we're going to run our code now. And okay, you know what? I'm going to change up some things here because this worked. But we got the value of I is 0, the value of I is 1, and then we have the length of the array is 3. We don't want to measure that array anymore. So we are going to copy lines 6 and 7, and then we're going to comment it out because we don't need it, and we can close line 3 because we don't need that one-dimensional array anymore. We're going to go to line 31. We're going to hit enter twice, and we are going to paste in the value of line 6. And then instead of doing array.length, we're going to do array to d.length. We'll run our code. And now you can see that we are measuring the length of our two-dimensional array. So we are going to be getting the first dimension of our two-dimensional array. So let's change that language a little bit from the length of the array is to the length of the first dimension is. This way we just kind of see what's going on, so that when we run this, we can see that our first dimension is 2 and the value of I is 0 and 1. Cool, so we are going to resume on line 39, and we're going to hit enter once, twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and we will log out the first dimension. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses. We'll do array 2d square bracket I. We'll run our code. And now you can see that we're getting some output here that shows us that the length of the first dimension is 2 and the value of I is 0. And when the value of I is 0 and we use it with our array 2d with square brackets, we are getting an array. So the first step of logging through a two-dimensional array is accessing the first dimension, which is all of the arrays in the two-dimensional array. The next thing that we're going to want to do is access each element of the array. So we're going to resume on line 42. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will loop through the second dimension. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we'll use for open parentheses j in array 2d square bracket I. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard twice, hit space, add curly brackets, hit enter once, add 2 slashes for a comment, and we will log out the value of j. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses j. And you know what we'll actually do? My apologies. We'll hit the left arrow on your keyboard so it says logger.log, open parentheses, and you are to the left of j. We're going to add in single quotes, and we'll say the element number is colon space, single quote space plus symbol space. We're going to add a semicolon to the right of our parentheses. We're going to hit save, and then we're going to hit run, and then I'll explain some stuff. So you will typically see when you nest a for loop within another for loop, which is what we've done here, that the second iteration variable value will be j. And I don't totally know why that is, but my assumption is that j comes after I. So when you declare variable I, you want to have some type of logical indication that those two variables are related to one another in some way, because you can't use the variable I again because you want it to maintain clean iteration so that it either increments positively or negatively in the right sequence. So typically you will see j as the nested loop value if you are looping within a loop, which is what you have to do when you're working with a two-dimensional array. So now we're going to result our console log here in an attempt to make it more transparent what happened here. So the first thing that we're doing is we are measuring the length of the first dimension of our two-dimensional array. So we have two arrays within our two-dimensional array, which means that our first dimension is represented by the number 2 for the two arrays that we are working with. When we loop through our two-dimensional array, we are accessing the first dimension using the iterable variable of I. So the value of I starts at 0, and when we pass our variable I to our two-dimensional array within the for loop, we return our first array, which is hey, galaxy. Those are the two elements in the array. Next, we get to our nested for loop, where we are declaring a variable j, which will also increment positively with a starting index of 0. And instead of just looping through our array 2D variable, we are looping through our array 2D variable using the variable I in order to access our first dimension. So because this second for loop is nested within a for loop, when we declare array 2D with a square bracket and the variable of I, the value of I will be passed into this second loop. So that is the same as us saying for j in and then square bracket hey, comma, galaxy. So when we return the variable j, it will also have a starting index of 0. And that's why when we have this logger.log here that says the element number is, and then we're referencing variable j, you'll see that we are getting output of 0 and 1. And that's because our array has two elements within it, hey and galaxy. And those are being measured out when we iterate through j. Once our nested for loop finishes looping through the value of array 2D square bracket I, the for loop with the value of I runs again. So it adds 1 to the value of I, which when passed to array 2D square bracket I, returns hi and universe. And because there are two elements in that loop, we get 0 and 1. And because our array only has two arrays in it, or our two-dimensional array only has two arrays in it, our loop concludes without error. So what we can do now is go to line 47. We can hit enter twice, left arrow twice, and we can log out the value of each element in the array. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, and then we'll use array 2D square bracket I square bracket j. And when we hit run, you'll see that we are getting two dimensions. The first dimension is an array. The first element in that array is hey. The second element is galaxy. The loop has completed both the for I loop and the for j loop, and then it is adding 1 to the value of I, which then returns the second array in our two-dimensional array, which is hi and universe. We then enter our nested for loop where there is a variable of j, and we begin at element number 1, which is hi, and then element number 2, which is universe. Now, this can be a complicated topic because of all of the moving parts. Understanding how arrays and two-dimensional arrays work is a tremendous step forward in your development and understanding of programming. Once you understand how to use for loops in order to loop through arrays and two-dimensional arrays, you will allow yourself the ability to process and transform larger amounts of data which will then set up your ability to develop applications that have functional use cases in scripting. We're going to resume by navigating to the Files module, where we'll be adding a new script file. Our focus is going to be on if statements, so we are going to title this f_if. We're going to hit enter, and we will change the name of our function to be if E explore. We'll save our function, select line 2, hit enter once, 2 slashes for a comment, where we will create a 2-dimensional array. And hit enter and tab. So we're going to declare a variable called array2d, and we'll set it equal to square brackets, and we'll hit enter. So we are going to be adding arrays to this 2-dimensional array. We're going to add square brackets, and we will have a string, and we will say mat, and we will use a comma, and then do single quotes, and then do mat at mat.com, and then we'll go to the right, and we will add an amount. We'll go to the right of our array, we'll add a comma, and we'll hit enter. We will create another array where we will enter in mark, comma, mark at gmail.com, comma, and then some amount. We'll add another array, so we'll add a comma at the end of our second array. We'll hit enter, square brackets, single quote, Hallie, comma, single quote, Hallie at gmail.com, comma, and then we'll do an amount, so we'll do 7. We're going to go to the right of our array, add a comma, and we will do one final array, a square bracket, and we'll set that equal to Christy, comma, single quote, Christy at hotmail.com, and we'll add a comma, and we'll do an amount of 20. We'll hit the down arrow on our keyboard, we'll hit enter twice, hit the left arrow twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and now I'm going to outline some if operators. I'm going to hit enter and tab. You can enter this if you want to. We're not going to be using any of this, but I just kind of want a place to talk about the types of things that we're going to be looking to use our if statement for. So basically, we are going to set conditionals, and we are going to loop through our array, and we are going to set statements that will either include or exclude values from our 2-dimensional array. So the first, and I'm not going to use var with these because we don't need them for anything, but I want to just kind of have it written on screen so you can look at it. So the first thing that we might want to use is when something equals something. The thing in the single quotes is going to be the operator that you will use in your if statement. So if you want something to equal something in an if, so if you say like if this thing equals that, then do this thing, you need to use 2 equal signs. And the reason for that is because of when we're declaring variables, if you use single equal sign, you are declaring something as. Whereas if you are using 2 equal signs, then you are evaluating it. So that's the big difference between the two, where if you do if something equals something with 1 equal sign, then you're effectively declaring it to be represented by that thing. Whereas if you use 2 equal signs, then you are evaluating to see if it is the same as. So I'm going to go to the right here, and I'm going to add a comment, and I'm going to say this means equal to exactly and or single quote does. So it does this thing, or it is this thing, or it whatever. I'm going to hit enter. The next thing is does not equal. And the way that you represent that is by an exclamation point and an equal sign. So if you want to say this is not or this does not, then you will use exclamation point and equal sign. So this means not equal to and or does not. I'm going to hit enter. The next thing is contains or like. So this is a regular expression or a more abstract way. So you can use dot includes in order to say this thing is like this or this contains this. So it is a regular expression to include similar but not equal things. I don't know if that's the best way to explain it, but that's kind of how my mind interprets it. You also have another way of saying does not, and that is by using a tilde. So you can add this to the beginning of something, and you can say like does not. Once this tilde is there, it's almost the same thing as the exclamation point equal sign, but there are some instances where the tilde is the appropriate syntax. So I'm just going to add that comment there. Another way of saying does not. So you can also have multiple conditions. So you can use an ampersand. So this represents and. So you can say something is equal to and something does not equal, or something is equal to, or it contains, or something like that, where you can have multiple conditions in order to evaluate your data. And the last thing that we're going to be playing around with today is or conditions. So you'll use a vertical bar in order to say something is something or something else. So I'm going to do my best to explore most of these operators to give you a sense of how you can create conditions for your data. So the premise here is going to be using a for loop. So we're going to be building on our previous lesson, and we are going to loop through this two-dimensional array, and we are going to use conditions through if in order to include and exclude data. So this is a very common way that you will be processing information as you build out applications and scripts and all that type of stuff. So I'm going to go to the right of line 17. I'm going to hit enter twice, left arrow on my keyboard twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and we will start by looping through our 2D array. I'm going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to do for, and then our variable will be I in array 2D. And hit the right arrow on our keyboard, and we'll hit space. We're going to have opening curly brackets, and we will hit enter once, where we will log the position of the array. Or no, you know what? We'll log the value of I. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, and we'll say single quotes, the value of I is, have a colon there, we'll hit space, we'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard, we'll hit space, we'll use the plus symbol, and we'll hit space, and then we will pass in I. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard, and we will add a semicolon. We'll hit enter twice, and we will hit the left arrow on our keyboard twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will log out each element of, we'll log out the first dimension of the array. So we'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, and we'll do array 2D, square bracket I. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard twice, and we will add a semicolon. We will now run our code, and you'll see that we are logging the value of I, and then we are using I with array 2D in order to access each array within our two-dimensional array. So the output in our console represents the first dimension of our two-dimensional array. We are adding one to the value of I each time our loop runs, which is resulting in us looping through each array within our two-dimensional array. So what we're going to do now is go on line 25 and hit enter twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and we will have an all caps if statement where we will create a conditional to evaluate an element in each array. We're going to hit enter, tab, and the way that you use an if is the same way as a for loop. So you'll do if, open parentheses, and then you will reference something. So in this case, we're going to use array 2D, square bracket I. And then we're going to pick one of our elements. So in this case, we are going to use element number 2, and we are going to look to see if it includes an at symbol. No, you know what we'll do? We'll look at element number 1. So we'll do array 2D square bracket I, and then we're going to use another set of square brackets so that we can access our first element. And we'll say if array 2D square bracket I, which is accessing the first dimension, and then square bracket 0, which is referencing the first element in each array, double equal sign, single quote, mat. We're going to go to the right, we're going to hit space, and we're going to add curly brackets. We're going to hit enter. And now we will log out if the condition was met. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, and we will use single quotes and say the condition of the if was met. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard twice, and we will add a semicolon, and we will hit run. So now you can see that we looped through each array in our two-dimensional array, and then we evaluated using our if statement if the first element in the each of the arrays was equal to mat. So we used two equal signs to evaluate the first element of each array. And when the condition was met, we had some logging here that said the condition of the if was met. And you'll notice that that does not appear for any of the other arrays. Therefore, they are not moving onto the next portion of the conditional. So using if is a way for you to include or exclude things. So additionally, what we could do here is instead of saying is equal to mat, we could say does not equal mat. So we can exclude all arrays that have mat as the first condition. So when we hit run, you can see that we are now getting the value of I is 0. So we are in our first iteration here. We are extracting the array with mat, and then we did not meet our conditions. So we move on to the next step of the program, which is iterating using the for loop to add 1 to the value of I. And then we are accessing our array at array number 1, which is our second array. And we evaluated the first element. And because it is not met, we have the condition of the if was met. Same thing happened the next time, same thing happened the next time. So you have the ability to include things using double equal sign, or you have the ability to exclude things using the exclamation point equal sign, which means does not. So what we're going to do now is we are going to add, we're going to change our conditions here a little bit, and we're going to remove the does not and the mat, and we're just going to have if array 2D square bracket I square bracket, instead of 0, we're going to do 1. So now we're going to be referencing the second element of each array. So these are email addresses. So we're going to say if the second element of each array dot includes, and then we'll have open parentheses. So we're going to use the at symbol because all the email addresses have an at symbol. So when we say if the second element of the array includes an at symbol, then the condition is met. So we're going to hit run. And now you can see that all of the arrays met the condition. So we are getting the condition of the if was met. So what we're going to do now is we are going to add in an additional condition. So we're going to say if the second element of each array contains an et symbol, then we're going to use the and operator so that we can have multiple conditions in here. And then we are going to use the tilde, and we'll have parentheses there, and we will say array 2D dot, or sorry, square bracket I, square bracket 1 dot includes, open parentheses, Gmail. Oh, sorry, we need to have that in strings. So if the second element of each array does not include Gmail, then the condition will be met. So what's happening here is our first condition is saying if the second element of each array includes an et symbol, which means that it's an email address, and the second element does not include, because we have this tilde here and we're using the includes operator Gmail, then we want to log out the condition of the if was met. So we're going to hit run. And now you can see that we are getting the condition was met for matt@matt.com and the condition of the if was met for christy@hotmail.com. But because Hallie and Mark both have Gmail addresses, they have not met the condition of the if and thus have no output in here. So what's happening here is we are using that tilde with parentheses and the includes method in order to say does not include Gmail. So this is one example of where you would use the tilde instead of the exclamation equal sign in order to exclude something that has a regular expression. In this case is using the includes method. Now the benefit of if is that you have a few tiers that you can use. So in addition to declaring multiple condition statements, sorry that had a typo there, you can also include an else if statement in order to define something else. So we're going to resume on line 31. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and we are going to have an else if statement, which is a conditional to evaluate a secondary condition. We're going to hit enter and tab, and the syntax for else if is the same as that. So you just type else if, and then you can have open parentheses, and you can declare a secondary condition. So if the condition, the primary condition that we have is something has to have an ampersand and it can't include Gmail, we can use else if to evaluate another aspect of our condition in here. So we will say else if array 2D square bracket I. And then we're going to use the third element of each array, which is an amount. So we'll say else if array 2D square bracket I, and I apologize because I have an extra square bracket in there, I2, so now we're referencing the third element of each array, is less than or equal to 10. We're going to hit the right arrow on our keyboard, and we will add curly brackets, and we'll hit enter, and then we will log out the secondary condition. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, single quote, and we'll say the secondary condition was met. We'll have hit the right arrow on your keyboard twice and to add a semicolon. And now we're going to run our code. And you can see that the conditions that we currently have for our primary condition is that the email element, our second element, needs to include an @ symbol, and it cannot have Gmail. So our first array of matt@matt.com has the condition of the if was met. So those are our primary conditions. Our second array is mark@gmail.com. He does not meet our primary condition. Additionally, we have a secondary condition that says else if the amount, the third element of the array, is less than or equal to 10, then that will trigger the secondary condition to be met. Mark has a Gmail account and his amount is greater than 10, so he does not meet our primary condition, which is the if, or the secondary condition, which is having less than 10 as your amount. When we get to our third array, Hallie has a Gmail account, so she does not meet the primary condition of our if. However, the amount, the third element of the array, is less than or equal to 10 because she has an amount of 7. That's resulting in her meeting the secondary condition, and thus the logging is saying that the secondary condition, in this case our else if statement, is being met, and thus she is getting that output. Finally, Christy has an email address that is not Gmail and has an @ symbol, so she meets the primary condition and is thus logging out the output from our if statement. So the final aspect of if is that if your primary condition is not met and it doesn't meet an else if statement, then we're going to resume on line 37. You can hit enter twice, 2 slashes for a comment. You can use an else statement. And that means that you can just provide something for items that do not meet defined criteria. So else just allows you to just generally throw out a statement. So there is no parentheses here. You're not defining anything. You're not declaring anything. You just write else, curly brackets, enter, and then logging. And you can do logger.log, open parentheses, single quote, else condition, because line item does not meet any defined values. Cool. So let's review this before we run it again. Starting from the top, we have a 2-dimensional array that has 4 arrays within it, each having 3 elements. The first element is a name, the second element is an email, the third element is an amount. We are using a for loop in order to iterate through each array in our 2-dimensional array. We have then constructed a nested set of logic using if, else if, and else. Our if statement is our primary condition. If the second element of an array has an @ symbol and that second element does not have a Gmail address, then the line item will meet the condition of our primary if statement. We developed a secondary set of conditions within an else if statement, where we are evaluating the amount in the third element of each array. If that amount is less than or equal to 10, then the secondary condition will be met. And my apologies because I got a little typo there that I'm going to clean up. Finally, if the line item does not include an @ symbol and it has a Gmail address and it has a value that is greater than 10, then it will return a generic else statement that just say none of the conditions were met and it doesn't meet any defined variables or values. So we're going to hit run, and you'll see that we log through all 4 elements of our 2-dimensional array. The first array has an @ symbol and it does not have a Gmail account, so the condition of the if was met. We move on to the second array. It has a Gmail account, so it does not meet our primary condition. Its third element has a value that is greater than 10, Thus, it does not meet our primary or secondary conditions, and our else statement is returned because this array does not meet any of our defined values. Our third array has a Gmail address, so it does not meet the primary condition of our if. However, its amount is less than or equal to 10 because it is 7. Therefore, it meets our secondary condition, which returns the output from our else if statement. Finally, our last array has an email account that is not Gmail, and thus it meets the criteria of our primary conditions and it returns the logging from our if statement. Learning how to use arrays, two-dimensional arrays, loops, and if are the primary building blocks necessary for learning how to program and to script. At first, they might be complicated, but I would encourage you to spend time to engage with them. Because once you understand how to tune your loops and your if statements, you will start to open up a whole new avenue of exploration as you look to develop within the AppScript environment. We're going to resume by selecting the plus symbol in our files module so that we can add a new script. We're going to be exploring how to build functions. So we're going to call this G underscore functions. We're going to hit enter. We're going to change the name of our function to be called greeting function. We're going to save our project. We're going to select line 2. We're going to hit enter once, 2 slashes for a comment, where we will begin by declaring a development variable. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to declare a variable called name. And we're going to set it equal to Matt. We're going to hit the right arrow and we're going to add a semicolon. So when you're working in AppScript, you have the ability to create a function, which you can then use throughout your script. So instead of rewriting variables or defining variables at a micro level, you have the ability to create a function that will transform whatever data type you're working with, whether it's a string or a number, so that you can pass an argument to the function, and then it will process the data in the way that your script intends. So what we're going to be building out is a function that takes a single argument, which will be a person's name. We're then going to be using our code.js script in order to loop through an array of names, and then we'll be using an if statement in order to include and exclude values based upon conditions that we want to see met. So we're going to navigate to line 1, and we're going to click in between the parentheses. To this point in the video, our functions have existed so that we can execute code. That way, we can evaluate our logic to see if the things that we're writing do what we intend them to do. But now, we're going to be looking to use this function in another file so that we can process something. So we're going to enter in an argument that this function takes. In this case, it will be name. So we're going to pass a name into our greeting function, and then we are going to return a result that will appear in our console log. So when we develop this name variable, and we have that comment of development variable, it's so that we can work on our function and have it compile code. Because if our function intakes a name variable and we don't define name, then our function won't run. Now, this is a simple function, so you really don't need this development variable, but I've found it to be helpful in the scripts that I run that take more complex computations and are typically working with data processing. So I just want you to know about this so that as you advance further, you have some strategies with which to explore the development of your functions. So we're going to resume on line 4. We're going to hit enter twice. We're going to hit the left arrow on our keyboard twice, and we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment. We're going to create a variable that will provide us with a salutation. Salutation, my apologies, spelling is not my strong suit. We're going to hit enter and tab, and we're going to declare a variable of greeting, and we'll set it equal to hello. We'll hit the left arrow on our keyboard and we will add a semicolon, and then we will hit enter twice, hit the left arrow twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and then we will declare the rest of our greeting. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll declare a variable of welcome, and we'll set it equal to single quote and say, we hope you have a great day ahead of you, exclamation point. We'll go to the right and we will add a semicolon. We'll hit enter twice, left arrow on our keyboard twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will develop our output. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll declare this as a variable, and we'll call it output, and we'll set it equal to greeting space plus, and then we will add single quotes and a comma and a space. Hit the right arrow on your keyboard once, hit space, add the plus symbol, hit space, add a name, hit space, add plus, hit space, single quotes, space, left arrow on your keyboard once, space, plus sign, space, and then use that welcome variable. Have a closing semicolon, hit enter twice, 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will log. We'll hit enter and tab. We'll do logger.log, open parentheses, output. Hit the right arrow on your keyboard, add a semicolon, and hit run. So now you can see that we are getting a logger output that says, hello, Matt. We hope you have a great day ahead of you. And I misspelled day, so I'm going to go back and fix that typo from dat to be day. And I'll hit run again. And now you can see that we have, hello, Matt. We hope you have a great day ahead of you. Wonderful. So what we're going to do now is go to line 16. We're going to hit enter twice, hit the left arrow on our keyboard 4 times, and add 2 slashes for a comment. And now we will return for output. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll use a new command that we haven't used up until this point, and we will say return space, and then we'll reference that output variable. So let me see. What I'm gonna try to do is I'll hit save, and you know what? We'll go to line 4, and we are going to comment out name, and we're going to hit save. So let's see what happens when we run our function. You can see that we are now getting hello, comma, undefined. We hope you have a great day ahead of you. And the reason for that is because we are referencing that name variable on line 13. And because we commented out our development variable of name, we have no longer defined what name is. And thus, when we return our output through logger.log, we are getting hello, undefined, and the rest of our statement. That's where the name argument of our function comes in. You'll notice that when I highlight that portion of the code, line 13 is also highlighted. So it's saying that we can take this argument so that if somebody uses this function, it will then represent name on line 13. And instead of undefined, it will represent name. So let's go to our code file and see what this looks like. So we're going to select line 2. We're going to hit enter once, add 2 slashes for a comment, and now we will test out the greeting function. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll just say greeting. And then you can see it pops up as an autocomplete suggestion, and it says function, greeting function takes one argument of name, and it does not have any defined method. So you can enter in numbers, you can enter in letters, it doesn't matter. So we'll do that greeting function. We'll have open parentheses, and now we'll enter in a new name. So we'll enter in a string of Mark. And now when we hit save, you can see that the function that we're running is called my function. So we're using this code.gs file in order to run our greeting function, which is coming from the file g_functions. So we're going to hit run. And now you can see we're getting output that says, hello, Mark. We hope you have a great day ahead of you. So the reason that we're getting that is because we have one argument that is used by the greeting function, and it is a name. So when we entered Mark into our greeting function, the underlying code in our g underscore functions file is processing that input and then giving us an output. So what we have the ability to do now is we can programmatically use this greeting function by looping through it. So what we're going to do is remove line 3 and 4, and we're going to start on line 3 without anything there. And we are going to add 2 slashes for a comment where we will create a one-dimensional array. We'll hit enter and tab, and we'll declare this variable as names, and we'll set that equal to square bracket, and then we'll separate them by commas. So the first name will be Hallie, the second name will be Matt, the third name will be Christy, and the fourth name will be Mark. We'll go to the right of our array and we'll add a semicolon. We'll hit enter twice. We'll hit the left arrow twice. We'll have 2 slashes for a comment. And now we're going to loop through our array. We'll hit enter and tab. So we'll do 4 open parentheses I in names. We'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard and we'll use curly brackets. We'll hit enter, 2 slashes for a comment, and we will log out our names. So we'll hit enter and tab, and we'll do logger.log, open parentheses, names. Go to the right arrow, we'll hit the right arrow once, add a semicolon, and now when we run our script, you'll see that we are getting, oh, my apologies, because I just passed in names. So we want to do names square bracket I, and then we'll run our code. And now you can see we're getting each name individually. So now, instead of just doing names, we are going to remove logger.log, and we will do logger.log, open parentheses, and we'll pass in that greeting function. We'll have an open parentheses, and we'll do names square bracket I. And now when we run our function, we are getting the output of our logging. So we're getting, hello, Hallie, we hope you have a great day ahead of you. And then we're getting some secondary output there. And the reason for that is because of, we're going to go back to our functions file real quick, and we're going to comment out this logging here. And then when we go back here and we hit save and then run, we are no longer going to be getting that duplication. So we're getting, hello, Hallie, we hope you have a great day ahead of you. Hello, Matt, we hope you have a great day ahead of you. Hello, Christy, we hope you have a great day ahead of you, so on and so forth, right? And I apologize because I misspelled Christy. Great. So now we have learned how to use a function. So what we can do in here is we can also use an if statement. So we're going to select line 7, and we're going to hit enter once. We're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, and we will do an exclusion condition. And we'll hit enter, and we'll say if, open parentheses, names, square bracket I, and then we'll go to the right of the square bracket. We'll hit space. We'll do 2 equal signs. So if names I is equal to single quote Matt, is not equal to Matt, we'll do if names square bracket I exclamation point equal sign, which means not equal to, and then we'll pass Matt. We'll have open curly brackets. We're going to highlight our comment that says log out our names and our logger.log with our greeting function and names square bracket I. We're going to copy that, delete our code, go into our curly brackets, hit enter, paste it in there. And our formatting is a little bit messed up, so I'm going to go to the left of line 11. I'm going to hit tab once, twice. I'm going to save my function. And now when I run it, you can see that we're getting, hello, Hallie, we hope you have a great day ahead of you. Hello, Christy, we hope you have a great day ahead of you. Hello, Mark, we hope you have a great day ahead of you. And we're not getting Matt because we've now used an if statement to set a condition where if the name is not equal to Matt, then it will run the greeting function. And if it is Matt, then it will not. And if we wanted to have some type of indication that we excluded Matt, we can go to line 12, we can hit enter, we can add 2 slashes for a comment and define an else statement. Hit enter and tab, and we can do else space curly brackets because we don't need to define any conditions for else. And we can do logger.log, single quote, Matt was excluded. And now when we run our code, you can see that when we get to Hallie, we run the greeting function. Our second name is Matt, so we say Matt was excluded because he does not meet the parameters of our primary if condition. He is returning the output from our else, and he is getting Matt was excluded, and then we get Christy, which is not the name Matt, so she's getting the greeting function, and Mark, who is also not Matt and gets the greeting function. Functions are, along with if and for loops and arrays, crucial elements of learning programming. So this is a very basic function to just kind of show you how input and output works and ways that then you can develop logic around your function to have clean, concise, and articulate code. I hope you found this series to be helpful. If you're interested in learning more about programming with Google Apps Script, then please check out my channel page where I have other projects and tutorials that aspire to open up programming to new audiences.